McDougal.
And he is in for a Jets touchdown.
That's over the middle in the air, picked off. Brian Poole to the end zone, touchdown.
There goes Darnold. And Bell! He's doing it all for the Jets.
And welcome back to another episode of the Cool Your Jets podcast. We're your hosts, Ben Blessington and Michael Nania. Another disappointing Jets loss, another blowout loss, this time to the Indianapolis Colts. Michael, how you feeling, man?
How am I feeling? I don't really know how you can – I mean, look, I wasn't even expecting them to compete in this game at all. I don't even know if I wanted them to win because, you know, we're all on this train to fire Adam Gase right now. And with one more game, it seems like it could happen based on the reports out there. So I didn't even expect them to win. But, you know, football has this way of being unpredictable. But with this team, it's just incredible how predictably bad they are. You think eventually they have to compete in the game, do something good on one side of the ball at least. But for the third straight game, both sides of the ball just completely dismantled, and the whole entire vibe of the team that you're seeing on the field just is completely lifeless. So it's the Jets have been remarkably bad so far, to say the least, and it has been extremely boring to watch. But at least this week they're in the 4 o'clock window, so we could watch most of the 1 o'clock games when the real football teams play, and then we get to watch Adam Gase do his thing and all these everyone else who's struggling on this team. So it was, I think, the best word to describe watching this team right now is just boring, because it's not even unexpected. You're just watching them get dismantled in a very unexciting way. So hopefully we only have to watch one more game of this guy. It would be great if he could get fired immediately after this game, but realistically it seems like you lose to Denver, you have the extra time after that to adjust from firing him, and then you could have 12 games of maybe playing competent football. But right now it's just completely as unwatchable as it has ever been.
Yeah, I mean, in our preview podcast on Friday, we talked about how this upcoming Friday, by the time you're listening to it, right after the Broncos game, would be the first time in the season that the Jets could theoretically move on from Adam Gase. I think me and you both kind of said at the time that we think that's unlikely, that Gase will probably try to use the injury excuse, which is, I mean, I don't want to say valid, but at least there is an argument to that the Jets are incredibly banged up. He's missing his top 4 receivers. He was missing his 2 tackles today once Mekhi Becton left the game. He's missing a star running back. Okay, so we figured he might survive. And then after this murderer's row of games that the Jets are going to play after week 4, including Arizona, which is an amazing team this year, having to travel out west to LA, the Patriots in prime time at home, Buffalo again. He's going to have to play Kansas City. He's going to play his former team. Week 11, we thought that was the time where, okay, I think that might be the time where it will actually happen, because I think Joe Douglas probably knows that he has to have some games to evaluate Sam Darnold away from Adam Gase, especially if things keep going like they're going. But after today, or by the time you're listening to this yesterday, I would say I would be pretty surprised if it doesn't happen on Friday. Look, the Jets could come out and now they're going to go ahead and win this game for Adam Gase, I guess, and he'll stick around a little bit longer. But if the Jets lose in a blowout fashion again, I would say I would expect it to happen Friday. The other thing that supports it was the one piece of good news we got yesterday, which was Mort from ESPN coming out and saying that the Jets executives and the Jets brass are internally looking at Adam Gase and taking these next 2 games, or I guess the one that already happened, but Indianapolis and Denver, to evaluate Adam Gase's position at head coach, and that they could make a move. And once that report came out after the game that we just witnessed, and especially if they lose to an injury-plagued Broncos team at home on primetime in front of the entire world, I would be surprised if Adam Gase is not canned on Friday. But of course, now that we're saying that, the Jets are gonna win this one.
But it's really interesting how this evaluation works. So you get to this point to where if you lose one more game to a really bad team, then you're okay with firing him. But if you beat this Jeff Driscoll-led Broncos team, it might not even be Driscoll. He was benched in this Broncos game or left it early. But if you win that game, say you win that game 10-3, now you're okay. You can play out the rest of the season. I believe in you. So it's just weird how these teams evaluate coaches, and it shows how little they know about the game. How I'm not sure they don't pay attention, but they clearly don't know what they're watching, because it's just been it's been obvious now for quite some time that Gase is not going to lead the Jets to a Super Bowl. I mean, it made sense, like we talked about last week. I think it made sense to bring him back after. You shouldn't have hired him in the first place, but after last season, yeah, you bring him back, but it's obvious already at this point that he's not the guy to lead this team anywhere, even to a winning record. So the fact that his fate should hinge on meaningless games and just whether you win or lose, because he's here to lead the offense. Yeah, he's the head coach, and that's a weakness in itself that he can't lead the whole team. But his main job is to develop Sam Darnold and lead a functional offense. And every single game we watch, they put up the same graphics on CBS. Oh, the Jets offense has really been struggling. They're last in this, they're last in that, and I post plenty of stats about how bad they are. So he's not doing anything effectively. So to put his fate on the simple win-loss result of one game against a bad injury-plagued team, well, I think the Broncos could have been a good team, but they're obviously really banged up right now. But it's just such a simple way of evaluating, and teams don't read between the lines at all. We all know evaluating Gase so closely, both before they hired him, based on his Miami tenure, what we've seen so far with the Jets, it's 100% certain he's not going to win a Super Bowl with the Jets, which is obviously the ultimate goal when you hire a coach. But teams still ownership is still hesitant to move on and just try something new, because you can't get any worse than he's been so far.
Right.
So it's just wild that teams are evaluate coaches in this way and can't just be honest with themselves and be like, okay, we messed up, we hired the wrong guy, let's move on, let's get him out of here as soon as possible and see if we can salvage this season. But no, we have to see if he can beat bad teams, and then it's okay for him to stay, even though that, and making that as important as the entire 19-game body of work, plus 3 seasons in Miami that we've seen so far that are entirely bad, I guess, save for his first season with the Dolphins. But it's curious why ownership has to do it that way, but it's just the way it is. So if they do lose this game to Denver, I would be very surprised if he returned for the next game. Just based on that report, though, like you said, because without that, I guess I would be surprised if they did fire him because of, Christopher Johnson just called him a brilliant offensive mind less than a week ago. So, but now with these reports, it does seem like if they lose this game, they should move on. And that's not going to fix everything, but it should provide a spark to a team that desperately needs it right now, because you just look at the body language in these games, whether it's the way they jog off the field, when you see the shots on the sideline, just no communication whatsoever between players, assistant coaches. Darnold is struggling, and the coaches aren't even talking to him, especially Gase. Barely, you never see him talking to anybody on the sideline. He's always just standing there with his arms crossed, looking at his play sheet. It's just not what you hire a head coach to do. He doesn't have to be, running up and down the sideline giving speeches, but at least something, especially for the quarterback you were brought here to coach. Just give him something, help him out a little bit. But, the body language isn't good. So firing Gase will not fix every issue with this team, but it will give you a little injection of life and motivation, whereas there is none right now.
Right. I agree with you a little bit on what you said. I disagree a little bit when you were talking about how ownership can evaluate or whatever after this Jeff Driscoll game. I would pretty much guarantee that Joe Douglas knows that Adam Gase is not going to return next year, unless the Jets go on a massive run in the middle or the end of the season to get to 9 wins or something. I'm fairly certain that Adam Gase will not be returning. But I do understand that it is a short week. I understand that they probably wouldn't fire him after a win, but they might not even wait to the bye. Even if they win, they could just wait a few more weeks and then fire him after the Patriots game or something like that. But I think ownership and Joe Douglas both know that Adam Gase is not going to be the coach in 2021. And that doesn't necessarily mean
and I mean,
they
I
should
guess
fire
the
him
bigger
on a
offense was just hiring him in the first place, really.
Right. But yeah, the point I was making is like, I understand why they don't want to just fire him immediately on a short week, especially only 3 weeks in the season. Although I agree, we made that point last week where it was like, they shouldn't have hired him in the first place. That's not Joe Douglas's fault. He wasn't here. But I do understand, like we talked about, that he was brought back because it's not fair to Darnold to keep ripping out the rug from under him. You have to give him another year in the same system. They did go 6-2 to finish, even though it was mostly Greg Williams' defense. So I understand, and they would have, been hurt by the fact that it was a COVID offseason with no OTAs, a shortened training camp, no preseason games. So they probably wouldn't have been much better with a different coach this year. But I agree, and I think Jets ownership knows that Adam Gase is not the guy. The Johnsons have never made an in-season coaching change. I think Adam Gase may be the guy to change it. I expect, like we just talked about, that if they get blown out, I think it's going to be on Friday that he will be gone, and we can throw a celebratory podcast on it. But as you said, yeah, I mean, it's not going to change everything for the Jets. They're still a bad team. This roster was not built to win now. Joe Douglas deserves some fair share of criticism, but it's not like he built this roster intending for them to win. I think Joe Douglas had a much more realist perspective on this roster. He knew where it was, and he knew it was going to take a rebuild, and they were going to do it the right way. They weren't going to try to make these short-term, big free agent contracts to try to immediately make the team better. And then if the player isn't that good, or if, like most free agent signings, that it doesn't work out, then you're not screwed over by having a bad free agent contract on the books. I mean, he's building it the long way through the draft, made a lot of 1-year free agent signings. If any of them hit, he'll bring them back. And then he saved a lot of money for this next offseason where he's going to have 2 first-round draft picks, 2 third-round draft picks, and a ton of cap space for a free agency pool that's going to be uber talented, because a lot of teams are going to be cutting their players to get under the cap. But anyways, the point remains that it's not going to change anything. But I think the two biggest things it does is, one, it gets them out of the building immediately, which I do think is positive. I do think they will win games without Adam Gase. So maybe the tank for Trevor dream could be dead if he's out of here. Like, I know a lot of Jets fans, including you a little bit, Michael, you're coming out a little bit in support of the Trevor Lawrence talk. And we'll talk about Darnold and Lawrence in a minute here. But the other point when we're talking about Darnold is that you have to be able to evaluate him away from Adam Gase, because this is a crucial year. The Jets have completely failed Sam Darnold with the talent they surrounded him with, both at weapons and on offensive line. The 2 different GMs, the 2 different coaches. The Adam Gase hire will go down in infamy for the Jets for ruining what should have been the number 1 pick in the draft in Sam Darnold, who's a super talented kid who, when he got to the NFL, was a better quarterback than Josh Allen. And now look at Josh Allen as a potential MVP candidate. And Sam Darnold, I mean, he looks completely flustered on the sideline. If you watched his post-game press conference, I mean, the kid looks completely rattled. The Jets have virtually ruined him up until this point. Now, he could come back with a different head coach next year, or go to a different organization, or the second half of the season and bounce back. But it's up until this point, the Jets have completely ruined Sam Darnold, and it's disappointing. But the point remains that it's a big season for him. If he's had 3 seasons where he hasn't proven he's the guy, even if we think that he still will be a good quarterback in this league, whether it's with Pittsburgh or with New Orleans, or even if we gave him longer in New York, if the Jets are picking first overall, they're taking Trevor Lawrence. And they're taking Trevor Lawrence, a generational talent, on a rookie deal, and trading Darnold for probably a second-round draft pick, rather than taking, maybe Penny Sewell or Jamar Chase or somebody like that, or trading down for a king's ransom. And then hoping that Sam Darnold turns it around. I think that Sam Darnold will turn it around his NFL career, but there's still a chance he doesn't, and you don't want to make the mistake. It's a different situation because Darnold is much better than Hackenberg, but you don't want to make the mistake that you made in 2017 of passing up on a guy like Mahomes or Watson because you believe in Hackenberg. I believe in Darnold. I believe Darnold will go somewhere else if it's not in New York and be a successful starting quarterback. But you still can't take that gamble, especially with him, and given where the team is at, that he's going to be going into his 4th year on his 4th contract. You're going to have to make a decision on the 5th-year option. If the Jets are the number 1 pick, they're taking Trevor Lawrence. And, Michael, let's talk about that. And I don't want to go too into the Trevor Lawrence talk for a few reasons. 1, we're week 3. 2, I think that Sam Darnold will bounce back. I do think that Sam Darnold will be a good quarterback in this league. And 3, I don't think the Jets are going to end up with a number 1 pick, if I'm being honest. I mean, they're the worst team in football right now, but I do think that once the Jets get healthier, that they will pick up a few games. And I think they'll probably most likely be picking 3 or 4 or something like that. That's just the Jets' luck. But Michael, let's talk about it. And you've mentioned it a little bit over the summer, how the nightmare scenario for Darnold is him turning into a Jameis Winston or a Marcus Mariota, where he's clearly proven he can start in this league, although these two guys aren't starting right now, but he's proven he can start in this league, but he hasn't proven that he is that superstar Mahomes, Watson, Rodgers, Wilson type of quarterback. And you're kind of stuck in the middle with the guy who has these great flashes of great quarterback play, like you saw in the Indianapolis game yesterday, where he made 2 different guys miss and he threw a dart to Braxton Berrios for the touchdown. But then he has other plays like both those pick sixes, the pick in the red zone, just inconsistent quarterback play that could really hold it back a good team. If the Jets do build up this roster, just talk about kind of the decision and the importance of this season for Darnold to show something, especially if he can get away from Adam Gase, and potentially the decision that Joe Douglas will have this offseason.
Well, I think, like you said, if they do land in the number 1 spot with a chance to draft Trevor Lawrence, then I think it's a no-brainer just because, Lawrence is a generational type of prospect in that Andrew Luck kind of caliber, Peyton Manning. And if you have the chance to get a new head coach and bring that guy in and just start the timelines over, get them on the same page, and get the rookie contract, and you could trade Darnold for some assets to help Joe Douglas in his rebuild. There's a lot of reasons to do it, but it really comes down to the fact that, if the Jets do get the number 1 pick, Sam Darnold probably didn't play that well. So I guess if you landed at number 1 and he does show you a lot over the rest of the season, then you could either trade that pick or a huge package for another team that wants to take Lawrence, or, that's probably what you would do instead of taking someone else. But in that scenario, I guess you could do that. But if the Jets are picking number 1, Darnold probably did not have a good season over the next 13 games, at least from this point. And that would be 3 straight seasons of below average production from him. And, for the first 2 seasons, you could hold on to the potential. But at this point, and like you said, he's only 23 years old. He still has plenty of time to carve out a good NFL career, whether it's with the Jets or somewhere else. So it doesn't mean this is the end for him. But if you're the Jets and you land in that spot, it's pretty much a no-brainer to do that. Kind of like the Cardinals with Kyler Murray a couple years ago, 2019. So, and also it's a good asset for the head coaching candidacy. If you go into that offseason and a coach knows, especially if you're looking for an offensive coach like Arthur Smith, the GOAT, the King, the Savior that you wrote about, then it's a big draw if you could come in and draft him number 1 and start rebuilding the franchise with him. So if they do land there, I think it's a no-brainer unless Darnold plays extremely well, which is highly unlikely if that scenario does play out. But like you said, getting the number 1 pick is a hard thing to do. The Jets are the worst team in football right now, but they do have some players coming back. And no matter how bad you are, it's just hard to get there. You need some pretty bad luck to get there. The Dolphins last year could not have built a better number 1 pick contender, and they still ended up 3 games back of getting that number 1 pick. And Sam Darnold is a streaky quarterback. He is going to have some good performances this year, and he's better. He's not the worst quarterback in the league. He's good enough to win some games. So I don't think they're going to land there. But
exactly,
the Jets are going to have an interesting situation at the end of the season if Darnold doesn't have a really good finish to the season, because look, the supporting cast hasn't been good so far, but he's still showing a lot of the same weaknesses that he did over his first 2 seasons, whether it's his feet and his accuracy under pressure, being a one-read quarterback, not scanning the field. The turnovers wasn't really an issue to start out the season, but he's now got 4 interceptions in 3 games, which isn't good. And a big thing we talked about in the offseason was he's got to avoid these games where the turnovers stack up. And now he had another 3 interception game here against the Colts. And you look at the interception numbers across the league, most starting quarterbacks didn't even have 2 interceptions over the first 2 weeks combined. So these 3 interception performances are just very uncommon, and you can't have too many of them. So it's been a rocky start. The team has not helped him out well at all. but still with some things that he can control, especially key weaknesses that have been recurring throughout his career so far. A lot of them are still there, and that's pretty worrisome. But if the Jets do fire Gase and you can get him, we'll see who takes over the play calling role. Is it Loggins? Does he stay around? Is it Jim Bob Cooter? We'll see who takes that over. But you get Gase out, you give him another chance to kind of see if he can rejuvenate himself and the offense. Got some reinforcements coming back. Mims, Bell, Crowder, George Fant missed this Colts game. Hopefully Becton comes back. Rashad Perriman. So you got a lot of reinforcements. You could get a spark with Gase. And he has plenty of time to finish the season strong and show some improvement in those key areas. But he does have a lot of stuff to improve upon really quickly in season if he's going to legitimately show that he's a no-doubt franchise quarterback. Because this first 3-game start is not that kind of – has not been that type of play where it's like, okay, he's no doubt the guy. He still could be, but it's very up in the air. So if you finish high in the draft, even if you can't get Lawrence, you could get a new head coach and he could start things over. Or not just a new head coach, but a runner of the offense, play caller. And he could start over with Trey Lance, whether it's Justin Fields. That's still an attractive thing for a head coach to do. So unless Sam Darnold can really turn it around and have just, especially not just the production, but his key weaknesses, the under pressure, the reading the field, the over aggressive decisions that lead to turnovers sometimes, unless he could show some major progress in those areas and turn that around during this season over what we've already seen through 3 games, then the Jets are going to be in an interesting spot at quarterback, especially with the new head coach coming in, who, we already have a general manager here who didn't draft him, and then you'll be adding another coach who hasn't worked with him yet. So even if they don't get Lawrence, I think they could be in that quarterback conversation, but we'll see what happens if they get Gase out. And then once that happens, I think you could kind of flip the page and see how he can finish out the season with just a new spark, a new vibe, and just a new approach to play calling. Probably won't be a different playbook, of course, but just a philosophy and overall feel, whatever the new play caller brings, how things change once Gase goes. But still plenty of time to evaluate him this season. But obviously, it has not been a good start for him.
Yeah, and let's get one thing clear. Sam Darnold is not the big problem with this team. I mean, there's about 5 to 10 other problems with this team. It starts with coaching. It starts with the team that's been assembled. Injuries have not helped. The Jets have completely failed Darnold when it comes to weapons and the line, like we just talked about. And especially when you look at the other young quarterbacks that were taken around the same time as him, what they've done to surround him. The Jets finally got a franchise quarterback, and they completely shit the bed with building around him. So let's get that out of the way. That just because we're floating this out there doesn't mean that either of us think that Darnold's performance up to this point has necessarily been entirely his fault. He especially hasn't had an offense built to his strengths. The Jets did run some more RPOs and rollouts on Sunday, and you did see some success with them, but not enough. I mean, they did get away from it in the second half. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned Trey Lance and Justin Fields, and I'm still in the boat that if they're in that situation, I think you definitely stick with Darnold, but that could change. And you're right. It does make it more attractive for a head coach to pick his own guy. You do have to remember that Joe Douglas didn't draft Sam Darnold. If he falls in love with a guy like Trey Lance or a guy like Justin Fields and they're picking number 3, I could see the Jets still taking a quarterback. Personally, right now, I would take Jamar Chase or Penny Sewell, or I'd trade down. But if they keep having performances like this, and Darnold did not have a good performance on Sunday, despite a few good plays, it wouldn't surprise me, especially if – and look, I'm number 1 on the Arthur Smith train. I think I'm about 99% certain that guy is going to be a great head coach in this league. You can go check out the article I wrote on him, and that's obviously the guy that I want the Jets to hire. But if the Jets don't hire him, if they decide not to, or if he goes to Houston or to Atlanta or something to take a arguably more attractive position, and that kind of goes back to what you were saying, if they have a number 1 pick, that this Jets job becomes a hell of a lot more attractive because they can say, well, I can be the guy who coaches Trevor Lawrence, who a lot of people think is a surefire top quarterback in this league. And then especially the Jets do have some nice pieces. They have a building a solid offensive line, especially Mekhi Becton. They have pieces in Quentin Williams, etc. But the point I was making is, let's say Douglas goes and hires a guy like Greg Roman. If he wants to go back to his Baltimore roots or something, he takes the offensive coordinator for Baltimore. I don't know how I'd feel about that. He's probably number 4 or 4, 5 on my list, just off the top of my head. I don't know if I'd want to see him. We haven't really seen him outside of Lamar Jackson. He did have a few good years with Colin Kaepernick in San Francisco. But let's say that's the move that Douglas makes, goes back to his Baltimore roots and whatnot. That's a guy who clearly would probably want to move on from Darnold and go get a guy like Lancer Fields who's a little bit more mobile. So this is a big year for Darnold, and he shouldn't get a pass. I mean, as we said, I mean, it's not all on him. The Jets have completely failed him. I mean, he's pretty much trying to do it all out there. The play calling's been bad. But I mean, he is still struggling to read the field at times. He still is only, he was staring down some receivers bad on Sunday. He's really only looking to one side of the field. The footwork was better on Sunday, but it's still at times he can get happy feet. As I was saying to Michael, I mean, he never in the pocket makes it look easy. I mean, he always looks stressed, and part of that's the happy feet, but he's always kind of, a scatterbrained, I guess, in the pocket. I mean, he's kind of always, jittering, and that makes him more effective because that's how he got the touchdown to Berrios as he shook two different guys to break free. But he never makes it look completely smooth and easy in the pocket. And part of that is the scars that the Jets gave him last year from having a terrible offensive line. And then this year, the offensive line's been better, but now with Becton out, I mean, he clearly did bring back some of that where he has happy feet and that timer in his head goes off, especially when you have receivers that can't get separation and a coach that runs a hyper complex offense that is not molded to your strengths. But let's get one thing straight, because I've seen this narrative from a few beat writers. I've seen it from fans, and Sam Darnold playing poorly, that's not an excuse for Adam Gase. That is actually more of an indictment on Adam Gase than it is an excuse for him. Adam Gase can't go to Joe Douglas or Christopher Johnson and say, hey, I mean, look, I'm calling good plays. This guy's open, but Sam's just not hitting it. Because when you come in and you're advertised as the QB guru, and I don't really know which QB Adam Gase molded, that was always a head scratcher to me, despite the fact that I've been maybe a little bit more positive on Gase than others. He's not had a quarterback that he's molded. I mean, he took over Peyton Manning, who was already a Hall of Famer, and Jay Cutler, who was already an NFL veteran, and Ryan Tannehill is doing much better under Arthur Smith. But you can't claim to be a QB guru and your whole job be dependent on Sam Darnold's success and then use that as an excuse to say, well, he's not playing well. I mean, what can I do? I mean, Sam Darnold playing poorly is a direct indictment on Adam Gase, and it can't be an excuse because I've seen it from beat writers trying to pin this on Darnold, and Darnold deserves some blame, but I'm just sick of the excuses for Adam Gase. He didn't really throw Darnold under the bus in the post-game press conference, but he continues to talk about execution. And he's right, the players weren't executing, but the coaching has not been much better.
Right, and I agree with you. And really with everything, you just don't want to take sides. Some of it's on Darnold not executing plays that are called pretty effectively, because as bad as Gase is, it doesn't mean every single play he calls in a 60-minute game is bad. And there have been some instances, especially in the Buffalo game, but also some in this Colts game, where Darnold's just missing open receivers, taking sacks when he shouldn't be taking sacks, throwing interceptions he shouldn't be throwing, and that's his fault. But like you said, Adam, the main reason he was brought here was, I don't know why this was believed to be a strength of his, like you said, but the main reason he was brought here was to develop Sam Darnold. So that can't be used as an excuse at all. And many of the same things showed up in this game as the 49ers game. Good first down run game, running again on second down, not calling play action, even though they did come out they did run some bootlegs early in the game, get Sam Darnold on the move. But predictably, they went away from it. And the opening drive, once again for Gase, is his best drive by far, again showing that he doesn't adjust, which was an issue in Miami and still is in the first game, second game, third game, just hasn't changed at all. So there's blame to go on both sides. Darnold isn't developing in areas that don't have much to do with those around him, just things that he should be able to be weaknesses that he should be able to clean up regardless of who his receivers are, who's coaches. So there's some blame on him and there's some worry there. But Adam Gase still deserves plenty of blame. It has to go to both sides. You can't just, it's all on him, it's all on this guy. There's Darnold's part of it, Gase is part of it, every player on offense, besides Mekhi Becton, of course, and pretty much every player on defense. It's everybody right now.
Right. And, in the world of sports like hot takes, and everybody needs to have an opinion. It's hard to try to be nuanced, I guess, in this landscape, but that's pretty much what the situation is. I mean, I think you laid it out perfectly that, look, I mean, Adam Gase hasn't done everything terribly, but he certainly, he mismanaged the clock at the end of the half. He's has an undisciplined unit out there. Injuries follow him around everywhere. The play calling gets predictable. I mean, there's a lot of issues with Adam Gase. And then, as I just laid out, Sam Darnold struggling falls in Adam Gase as well. That's another, mark against him. But then, yeah, I mean, Darnold has struggled in his own right. I think that the story with Darnold at this point, and that first half is probably the best, I guess this game is a good example of it, probably more negative than positive, of the Sam Darnold experience so far, but he's yet to show whether he's a franchise quarterback or not. And when you're in year 3, regardless of the situation, even if the Jets have literally have wrote the book on how to ruin a franchise quarterback, you still have to judge him. You can't baby him. But, I mean, if he was drafted to Buffalo and had an offensive line put in front of him and had receivers, and weapons and a stable organization and an offense built to his strengths, is Sam Darnold the one having the MVP season? Because I think he might, and it's just the unfortunate reality of the NFL. And you don't trade Darnold if you have the number 1 pick because you think he's a bad quarterback. You just take it because that's just the way the NFL works, and you can't pass up that opportunity. But like you said, Darnold is so streaky that I don't think they're going to have the number 1 pick. I would still say Darnold is the likely quarterback, for the Jets next year. I think the Jets will get healthier. I think they will win some games. I don't know against who, but I mean, I could see them stealing a game, maybe against LA or probably more likely Miami, or, it's about it that I can think of off the top of my head. But I still think they will pick up a few wins. Darnold, like you said, is streaky. He will have a few good games here. So I don't think they will have to be making that Trevor Lawrence to Sam Darnold decision. But through 3 weeks, I mean, they're easily the worst team in football. There's not even anything close. I mean, it's just – I don't think have they even been tied at any point in any of their games yet? Or have they just
0-0. It has been 0-0.
Sorry, my bad. But at any point past 0-0, have they ever been at least tied?
No, not even tied. Forget about leading. Haven't even been tied.
And that falls on the head coach. And Michael, before we move on and we talk a little bit about this Indianapolis game, and we'll also talk about Denver's game since it is a short week. I mean, I guess the roadmap that we've been talking about is firing Gase on Friday. Let's talk about it a little bit. I mean, what are some of the biggest things that you think could happen from this? What are some of the things you'll be watching if it does happen? Who do you think should step up into that interim role? And what would just be kind of your expectations for a Gase-less Jets and most likely a Gase and Dow-less Jets? And it's part of the reason why I think it's so stupid to have really, when you have Dow be your quarterback and your offensive coordinator, and then Gase is really your offensive coordinator and your head coach. So it's really 2 guys running 4 jobs, even though they both share the offensive coordinator job. If you're going to fire Gase and you're going to fire Dow, I mean, you're short-manned on the offensive staff. You're completely wiping out that staff. So there is a scenario where Dow does survive past Gase, but I would hope that the play calling would go to Jim Bob Cooter. But, Michael, let's just kind of talk about the post-Gaseless Jets, what your expectations are, what some of the things they can do, and what you're hoping to see.
Well, what you said is the interesting point, because you assume Dowell would go because those 2 guys are kind of attached to each other. Like, I don't even know if they've ever been in a different room as each other. Like, they just go everywhere together, call all their dumb plays. But that would be interesting because, like you said, if you fire both of those guys, you're losing, your head coach / offensive coordinator and your offensive coordinator / quarterback coach. So that's a pretty big hit. And you have 3 pretty big roles to fill if you do that. So I think that, the best candidate to take over the play calling is obviously Jim Bob Cooter, who did a pretty good job over a few years in Detroit. So he's easily the best candidate to take that over. But would they let go of Dowell, or would they promote him to the play calling duties and maybe put someone like Brant Boyer or even Greg Williams at head coach? That's a possibility. But I think that's the first interesting thing to look at, how they would fill in for Gase. But I think the biggest thing is that, look, things aren't going to change too much. They can't rewrite the playbook in the middle of the season. come up with an entirely new scheme, but they can change the philosophy and the timing of calls and just the overall
Game
approach
planning,
and game planning and
play calling.
adjusting. Just everything changes in the way that just from a philosophical standpoint and the
And I
ability to adjust in game. So there are a lot of things that change.
and I do think that Jim Bob Cooter could. I agree with you that he's not going to be able to change the playbook, but he will have if this does happen on Friday. And look, I don't want to get my hopes up because I already feel the Jets winning on Thursday. But I mean, he would have 12 games and a bye week to slowly work in some of the things that he ran in Detroit. He would have some time in practice to run them, maybe running some stuff that they ran in college, maybe more of today's game plan with the RPOs and the rollouts. I mean, they can change the philosophy, even if they can't change the playbook, like you said. I think the big thing is play calling, and then like what we were just talking about, the philosophy of rolling them out, running RPOs, and then probably slowly working in some Jim Bob Cooter Detroit concepts.
Yeah, and I think the biggest hope is it all comes down to Darnold. How is he going to respond to this? Is this something that can help him turn everything around? Because I think a lot of the issues with him are, they come down to just fundamentals, both mentally and fundamentally, his footwork, his decision-making, things like that. So can a switch help him turn that around? Can a change in philosophy, getting him out on the move more, going to some of your play-action bootleg calls a little more often, getting him to, throw the ball in second and short, call some play-action shots instead of running the ball. Let's always get you to third and short and try to move the chains. No, let's take some shots. And things like that, get him into a better rhythm, kind of start to work out some of those weaknesses. And can they really just find a way to get the most out of him in the circumstances? And can he respond and do a better job feeling more confident in the pocket and under pressure and with the plays that are being called? And just calm down, settle down more, and work some of these weaknesses out of his game slowly to the point where at the end of the season, you feel like he's a much progressed quarterback from the point Gase was fired. Because right now, things just aren't looking too good. No matter, you could sugarcoat it however you want, but 2 touchdowns and 4 picks in 3 games doesn't, or 3 touchdowns and 4 picks in 3 games. And, just the production hasn't been there. So, you hope that with firing Gase, you could slowly, gradually get him work some of these weaknesses out of his game, be a more comfortable fit in the offense that they choose to run once Gase does go, and by the end of the season have a Sam Darnold that looks much more fully realized and much more capable of being relied upon to be your franchise quarterback. So that's the biggest thing. Can firing Gase help you fix Sam Darnold? Because I don't think it's just a flip a coin, black and white thing. Gase goes, Darnold is great now. It's not going to be that simple, but it's more so, can they find ways to slowly acclimate him into a system that works for him and get some of these weaknesses out of his game to the point where he can be more consistent near the end of the season. We know he can throw the ball. We know he's physically talented. We see it every single week, but can a new coaching staff with a new voice at the top, a new play calling approach to everything, can that help him get some of the biggest issues that are holding him back from being consistent on a week-to-week basis? Can they clean those things up so he can be solid and efficient every single week? And even in games where he doesn't throw the ball too well, doesn't have his best stuff, still produce at a decent level because they have an offense that he can thrive in. So that's the biggest thing. Can firing Gase help Sam Darnold? Slow, not instantly. I don't think he's just going to come out and be the best version of Sam Darnold immediately just because Gase isn't there. But slowly over the course of the season, can he have a couple solid games, maybe a great game, and then maybe struggle a little bit, but then put together a good final 8 games? Just slow, gradual progress towards having a really good finish to the season. I think that's what you hope to get out of Sam Darnold if you do fire Gase after this Denver game.
Yeah, I think the other big thing it does is it gives you a head start on the coaching search. It gives ownership and management kind of a head start on to keep an eye on some guys like an Arthur Smith or an Eric Bieniemy or a Brian Dable or something like that. And, part of the other reason I think we want it is just to get him out of the building. I think it'll help us be able to cheer for wins because there's always that nightmare scenario in the back of my head. It's like, well, when did the Jets kind of have what happened last year where they start terribly, but they keep him and then they pick up, a few ugly wins, and it's like, oh, well, the Jets finished 5-1 down the stretch or something, and that's momentum we can build on in 2021, and we bring Gase back. The sooner that he's just out of the building, I could be like, okay, he's gone. He can't hurt us anymore. And the other thing and I tweeted this out, was that all 3 of Sam Darnold's touchdowns this year have not been a result of Adam Gase's play calling. He audibled the screen to Crowder week 1, and then he's had 2 broken plays back-to-back against San Francisco or Indianapolis. So we've yet to see a play call from Gase result in a direct touchdown.
I have not thought about it that way. That is absurd.
Yeah, and it's absurd the amount of and the other ridiculous stat I saw today was that Gase has now had 30 blowout losses in his career, and he only has 30 wins. And this is also just the 3rd straight game where they've been down at double digits at half. So even if everything isn't on Gase because the defense has been bad, the injuries, Darnold has been underwhelming, etc., it still falls on Adam Gase, and his head should roll because of it. Because like you said, it made sense why they brought him back, not necessarily because he deserved it based off the season that they had, but more so just the situation they were in with their young quarterback and I guess the finish that they had. But more so the situation with the young quarterback. They gave him the beginning of this season, but I think, and the hope was that he was going to be on a short leash because like you said, it was pretty clear before he was hired here, and then once he was hired, that he was not going to win a Super Bowl for the Jets. I mean, it's been pretty clear, I would say, since week 1 against Buffalo, and especially that 0-4 start, and more so than that, than the 3 games they lost to New England, Jacksonville, Miami last year. It's just been very clear that Adam Gase is not the guy to lead the Jets. And the reason he's still here is just to not rip the floor out from under Sam Darnold. But regardless, Michael, and plenty more discussion of this to come, because if he doesn't go on Friday, and he's back for a few more weeks or potentially the whole season, this is going to be the discussion every week is how he's holding the Jets back, how he's holding Sam Darnold back, why he should be fired. It is important to remember that the Johnsons have never fired a coach midseason. Gase and Douglas are friends. There is the injury excuse. Darnold has been underwhelming. The defense has been bad. So there is, I don't want to get anybody's hopes up because there is still a chance that he survives past week 4. He could survive the whole season. I don't see that happening, especially with just how poorly they've been playing. But my hope is that it happens Friday, just so we can have the situation where he's gone. They promote Jim Bob Cooter. And like you said, it's not going to fix everything, but I at least feel like I can cheer for wins again. I'm going to at least feel like I can go back to cheering for Darnold to ball out. Because I don't want Trevor Lawrence. I mean, if they're at number 1, I'll take him, happily, I guess. But the best scenario for the Jets is that Darnold balls out the last 12 games of the season, and just proves that he's just was another Adam Gase casualty. But like you said, it probably wouldn't happen immediately. But anyways, just something to keep in mind on Thursday, and we'll talk about the game in just a few minutes, about what we're expecting, I guess what we're hoping for. But let's just take a look back on Sunday a little bit, Michael. Not much to talk about, if we're being honest. I mean, I was trying to think of a single positive from that game, and outside of Mekhi Becton, while he was healthy, there's not a single one. And Mekhi Becton got hurt, so that's a negative. And we're hoping that injury isn't too bad. It'd be a real bummer if Mekhi Becton's out for a significant period of time. But by the time you're listening to this, hopefully there's a good injury update on him. Knowing the Jets like it'll be terrible. But Michael, what are your thoughts on Sunday? Any positives that you could find? And once you say no to that, what are the negatives? What are the biggest negatives? Just kind of your overall thoughts on the Jets' performance against the Colts.
No positives. On to the negatives. No, but really, I mean, this is usually there's something you can point to. Like last week, there was Quinn Williams, Becton. I thought Jordan Jenkins, John Franklin Myers played good, but this game, there's really nothing. I mean, I guess Braxton Berrios, 4 catches, 4 targets, 64 yards, the touchdown. Franklin Myers did make a couple of plays. Bryce Huff played in this game, and he did get a pass deflection, and he had I think this is a play he got credit for the deflection on, but he had that rush where he made some contact on Rivers, forcing incompletion. So, friend of the podcast, he debuted and at least showed one flash that I noticed. So, I mean, I guess that's it. And I think the offensive line, without watching the film, it's hard to know who played well, who didn't, but they did seem pretty solid for the most part. It seemed like Becton was playing another good game when he was in there. So would have to look back on it to see more about who's playing well. But I mean, they continue to have a pretty good early down run game, and the blitz pickups for the most part pretty solid. A few exceptions, there were some unblocked ones, but I mean, all we wanted from this offensive line was for them to be okay, not terrible this year, and they've definitely been that. So I do think that's a positive, and it's also a little worrisome because you can't really use it as an excuse for Darnold or Gase as much as you could last year or in 2018 in Darnold's case. So I do think the offensive line is good, but I mean, overall, especially the defensive side right now, there's very little to like about the defense, just front to back. Pretty much everyone is struggling. I don't think the missed tackles were as bad in this game as the first two, but the coverage at every position is just not good, both in terms of miscommunications and just, pure man-to-man coverage and zone. In both facets, they're struggling. And the pass rush, the Jets had one quarterback hit in this game. One quarterback hit. The Colts threw 25 passes and obviously 0 sacks. So the pass rush is weak too. The run defense, I guess you could still hang your hat on that. I mean, the Colts had 119 yards, but their yards per carry was above 4. So even that's if you take out the kneel downs, it was above 4. So I guess can't really look at the run defense anymore either. So it's really bad right now. There's anything that is a positive is not to take away from the players who you are crediting, because guys like Barrios, Huff, Franklin Myers, some of the O-linemen did play well. Not to take away from them, but all the positives are so small that they barely even make an impact on the entirety of the game.
Yeah. I think Franklin Myers for me would be the biggest positive. But again, I mean, we were talking about, and look, for defensive linemen, especially interior defensive linemen, you can't always expect to have those monster games like Quinnen had last week. But again, it was I didn't see Quinnen at all. I mean, we'll still have to go back and watch the coach's film to see if he had any hidden pressures or plays in the run game. But a quiet game from Quinnen. It seemed like May has cooled off since his first game, although he did have a nice stuff. I think it was on 3rd down. McDougald got shook for a touchdown in the game. It was just, I mean, there were a few good things. I thought they had that nice drive. Me and you called it. I mean, I said in the preview podcast that I actually thought the Jets were going to have a nice long touchdown on the opening drive and then shit the bed the rest of the game. That's pretty much what happened. I mean, outside of the pick 6, it was the second drive. They drove all the way down the field. It looked pretty. And in classic Gase fashion, nothing else. I mean, literally their last points of the game. So, yeah, I mean, there were some positives. Darnold had some good plays, but probably more bad plays. The receivers were pretty bad. Kaiser on that first interception, I know he was getting a lot of love from Jets Twitter. I think he did make a few nice plays towards the end of the game, but on that interception was completely late getting off the ball, didn't come back to the ball either, which led to the pick 6. He was open on the second interception for a touchdown. That interception, it's still a bad play on Darnold. It's not as bad as I thought it would be because he technically didn't read the coverage right, but he really did because Xavier Rhodes thought it was zone and started playing the flat, but then he realized he was actually in man. So Kaiser was wide open, but once he realized he was in man, he darted back and jumped the route. But if you look at when Sam Darnold throws this ball, Kaiser is open. It's just kind of an unfortunate play, but still a bad play because Herndon does get open at the top of the screen, and it's yet another example of Darnold just only reading one side of the field. And then the third interception, it looked like he expected a post route or something, but still just a bad play and a pick 6. So, yeah, I mean, in my mind, the positives, like you mentioned, I mean, I think John Franklin Myers is probably the only one that immediately comes to mind for me. But looking ahead to Thursday, Michael, this is a Broncos team and this is a game that I marked as a loss because initially, I mean, I bought into the Broncos hype. They have a ton of weapons on the outside between Hamler and Judy and Sutton. And Drew Lock was at quarterback, and they had Von Miller and Bradley Chubb, and injuries have completely depleted that team. They're 0-3 like the Jets are, but the Jets are still a worse team. I think every player, especially after that Chris Mortensen report came out, and look, if this was any other report, and Chris Mortensen isn't the end-all be-all. He's not Adam Schefter or Ian Rappaport, but he has been a voice in the game for a long time, so I do trust his report that somebody in the Jets organization did tell him that. If this was just some random beat reporter, I would be a little bit more skeptical, but I do think there is some weight to that report. And I think the players know about it. I mean, they were asked about it in the press conference. So I think they know that they're playing for Gase's job. Certainly a few of them came out in support of Gase. Greg Van Roten was very vocal. Sam Darnold, Connor McGovern, talking about how they just need to execute. So Thursday's their chance to fight for their head coach, because if they just get blown out 4 straight times like they've been playing, I mean, it's good night for Adam Gase. Michael, what are you looking for on Thursday? I guess we're probably cheering for another loss again, it's hard because it's, the Jets used to bring me so much joy on Sundays. I'm not really sure when, I guess 2010 and maybe 2015 for a little bit there, but it's just hard taking something that you used to enjoy so much and just having to sit there, just suffering, yawning during the game like you were, and just watching.
Yep, I was.
this team just play terribly. But I guess that's kind of what we're cheering for on Thursday. What are you looking out for when it comes to that, when it comes to how the players fight for Gase? And then maybe some key matchups. I mean, we don't necessarily know the status about Mekhi Becton and some other players, but what are you looking for on Thursday?
Well, I mean, I think from a fan perspective, it's hard not – we've gotten this far. I think it's hard not to, to hope for a loss. And when I think the Jets should lose games, I don't sit there and really root for them to lose the game. But, looking at it objectively right now, obviously Adam Gase is the number one problem in the organization, not the only one, but clearly the biggest one. So for him to get out, it seems like losing this game could be the final nail in the coffin. So it's hard not to look for that. But in terms of matchups, like you said, Denver was a team that had a lot of promise coming into the season, but lost Von Miller, lost their starting quarterback, Drew Lock, who they're hoping to have a big second season. So injuries have really taken away for them what could have been a promising season, but they were pretty competitive the first 2 games. Played Tennessee and Pittsburgh, 2 undefeated teams, played them very closely. They were blown out by the Bucs here in week 3, but they played 2 really good teams very well. The Jets haven't done anything well at all through 3 games. So they're still a better team than the Jets, I think, even though they have a lot of injuries. Jets are playing at home, which even though the fans aren't there, home field has still been an advantage this season.
And that's a travel
in terms of the win percentage. And yeah, the travel too is pretty big. So even though the Jets have that going for them, the Broncos have played better football than them this season. So I think they're still a better team. But this is a game that it feels like the Jets – it's hard to say it feels like the Jets will win when they haven't been leading for 1 second.
26-21, Michael. 26-21.
26-21, exactly. I don't know what that means. I still don't know. But it's pretty much an iconic Cool Your Jets meme now. But it feels like yeah, I think so. But I do think it feels like that the Broncos are going to lose this game to the Jets. That's just kind of the gut feeling. But look, I think the Broncos are better than them. And the Jets have no right to be considered the favorite in a game. They're probably going to be underdogs in this game at home to an 0-3 team. That would probably be my guess.
You talked about it. Denver's played 3 straight really good football teams. And I think that kind of what you were just saying is that this game is either going to go 1 or 2 ways. Either they're going to come out playing for their head coach, Sam Darnold's going to ball out. They're going to come out knowing that they've been embarrassed for 3 straight games. They're at home. They're wearing the black unis. They're playing another winless team that's injury plagued, and they're going to come out and win this game. Which is, I have a feeling
they're wearing the black unis because it's Gase's funeral.
There it is. I could see that joke a mile away. But I mean, that's one scenario, and
I
that's
said it
kind
first. So everyone who tweets that, I already have that one.
Okay, it's like the Arthur Smith article. But yeah, that's one scenario, and I feel like that might happen just because we don't want it to. But the other scenario is, look, there are 4 days ago they played one of the worst games, of anybody all year. They looked completely deflated. You talked about it. I mean, there's just little things. There's no hustle from anybody running from the sideline to the huddle, the body language on the sideline. Nobody's talking. You mentioned to me before the show. I mean, has Gase ever once yelled at a ref or anything? There's just no energy. No, I mean, as Gase said last week, there's no juice. There's just nothing. So I feel like I mean, I want that to happen. And like you said, I mean, it's been hard to get a finger on the Jets' pulse because me and you kind of thought they might bounce back week 2. We looked like idiots afterwards. So even though I think me and you kind of both feel similarly that they will come out on Thursday Night Football and win it for Gase, unfortunately, and keep him around for a few more weeks. There is the scenario where they really are just as bad as we think they are. And even if they win, they probably still are. That could just be a fluke. But just given the performance that we've seen back to back to back, there's really no reason to expect anything differently up until this point. I still, in the back of my mind, think that the Jets, unfortunately, might pull this one out. But up until this point, I mean, it's just been ugly performance after ugly performance after ugly performance, seemingly just topping themselves every week. I mean, in some ways they're getting closer, but in other ways, I mean, the score differential is just getting wider. So, but I'm sorry, I cut you off a little bit earlier, but I know you're
I don't really see the ways they're getting closer, though.
Well, I meant in the sense that
really.
the first game, it didn't feel like they were moving the ball at all. And then the second game, they started to move it a little bit the beginning, and they couldn't get it done, and then they didn't get a touchdown till the end. And in this game, they moved the ball. They scored a touchdown. Did they tie it up at 7-7?
Oh, they were tied. So
they were sorry. My apologies.
To shut down the podcast now. It was 7-7.
So there was progress in that sense, and that's what Gase said. But in the vast, in every other sense of the word, there was, regression in the sense of the score differential is wider. Darnold turned it over 3 times. It just seems like there's progress in the way that the offense is moving. I feel like they're tackling a little bit better. They did run some RPOs and roll out, but they're getting worse results. So it's kind of a weird situation is kind of what I meant by that.
Well, I guess by the end of the season, maybe they could, have everything going, and maybe week 17 they'll win their first game. But actually, I was thinking before that what probably will happen is the Jets will be in position to get the number 1 pick, and then Bill Belichick comes in and he decides that he doesn't want Trevor Lawrence in his division, and he throws the week 17 game just to sabotage the Jets again.
Michael, don't you put that evil on me. If the Jets are in that situation, and I mean, I don't. I will say that New England is, if you want to see a good, I mean, obviously everybody knows Bill Belichick's a good coach and the Patriots are a great organization, but just look at how they're playing, because people were counting them out and saying they were going to be trash this year and that they had all those players opt out. And you can't really replicate New England, because anytime you have, and I think it goes the same for Lombardi or any of those other Hall of Fame coaches, and when you're a player that's playing for one of those Hall of Fame coaches, just the expectation is just higher. Everybody rises to the occasion. There's nobody who's late to a meeting. It's hard to instill that when you're Joe Judge in New York, but when you're Bill Belichick, you just watch him and just how respected he is, and everybody in that locker room knows who he is, and they want to play well for him, and they know he's an absolute legend. I mean, that's why they have a winning culture. That's what it is. And the Jets have Adam Gase, and that's just a complete losing culture, because guys feel like, oh, well, if I fumble this ball, I'm not going to be taken out of the game. And, they feel maybe more loose and willing to try things that it just feels like under New England that the guys just do their job. They're just very focused, very detail-oriented, and it doesn't really matter that Tom Brady's not there. I mean, they look fantastic this year with Cam Newton. So I'm hoping, Michael, that the Patriots are still fighting the Bills for the division, and so they have to play Cam Newton and they can beat the Jets. But if that scenario were to arise, I'm still cheering for the Brant Boyer, Sam Darnold, Jim Bob Cooter takeover for the last 12 games.
Yeah, and I do, to talk more about Darnold and his development over these next 13 games, I think the biggest thing with the Jets this season is you want a definitive answer. You don't want to be stuck in you mentioned it earlier, but the Mariota or Winston kind of trap where it's like, okay, he's not bad enough to where we're going to move on from him yet, but he's also not good enough to make the playoffs or compete yet. We're kind of just hanging on to the hope and the potential. It's not really a good place to be in. So I think it would be best for the Jets if either Darnold plays really well and proves, okay, we can believe in him, we can build around him. Let's use whatever draft capital we get to build around him instead of finding someone else to build around. Either get that or, get a more definitive answer where it's like, okay, we have the number 1 pick. We're going to go with Lawrence, or we have a top 5 pick. We're going to get a new head coach that's going to build around someone else. And Darnold has shown that he's clearly not the answer. And it's depressing to think about it like that, but the Jets are really getting into this dangerous ground with him where they could be getting into that Winston Mariota sort of trap where, I mean, this is already going to be the third straight season they've missed the playoffs with him, and it's not even close to all his fault. Not even close, but still, it's 3 seasons now in which he hasn't been very productive. And if, he's already had 3 seasons, and you look at all the quarterbacks in the past who have gone 3 consecutive seasons to start their career below the league average in most metrics, pretty much all of them, with very few exceptions, have gone on to be good. I think the best example is Alex Smith, and it took him quite a few years to get to that point and a major injury in the middle of that. So it's not promising if he has another season that's disappointing, even though there are a lot of legitimate excuses for him. And the biggest thing is not necessarily what his production is, but what the main weaknesses we talked about, what you see from him on film with under pressure, just reading the field, fundamental and mental things that he should have improved by now, regardless of his supporting cast. So I think that's really the biggest thing is, can you get a very clear answer coming out of the season? Is Darnold your guy or is he not? Because, if you're going to another season and he's still in that middle ground, it's just dangerous territory where you could keep having these seasons where you're holding on to hope, but he never really fulfills it. And ultimately you spend half a decade waiting for him to break out, and it never really happens. So ideally he plays really well. You fire Gase, he explodes. Whoever takes over does a much better job of building around him. And he shows you that he's your franchise quarterback, and you could supplement him with the many picks they have next year. Hopefully that happens. But if it doesn't, I'm just in the camp where it would be better to just get that number 1 pick, get Trevor Lawrence, move on. And it would be better to do that than kind of be stuck in the middle again and just continue to hope like, okay, we think he could be good, but he was also very unproductive for a 3rd straight season and still has the same rookie kind of weaknesses for the 3rd straight season. I think it would be better to get Lawrence to be dealing with that. So I think it would be the best case scenario for the Jets would be one of those 2 things. Get that number 1 pick / no Darnold isn't your quarterback, however that happens, or know that he for sure is your quarterback. So that's really how I look at it. And it's depressing kind of to look at that negative viewpoint, but the Jets are going to have a new head coach next season, 99.9%. And, it would be good to get him on the same timeline as his quarterback, because if you have a new head coach, then you have Darnold. If you get a new head coach and you keep Darnold would be going to his 4th year. Douglas would be going to his technically 2nd season with the team, and you'd have a new head coach on his 1st season with just these timelines all over the place. And then if Darnold doesn't work out, then you have the coach with a new quarterback who's in his 1st year, and the coach is in his 2nd year. So to sync everything up would also be a very helpful thing if Darnold isn't, legitimately proven to be that franchise guy. So for me, I would really like to see a definitive answer either way. Is Darnold going to break out and be like, he's no doubt the guy, or are they going to finish the season knowing, all right, we have to go in a different direction? So that's really how I see it.
Yeah, and that's exactly how I feel. And I'm a big Sam Darnold fan, and I'm cheering for the version where he really balls out, and maybe the Jets end up picking 6 or whatever. And it's like, well, okay, Darnold is clearly not the problem with this team, and then they can supplement him with Jamar Chase or somebody like that. But the Indianapolis game really did give off some major Jameis Winston vibes. And that's not the vibe that I've gotten from him the majority of his career. I think he's a better player than Jameis. But you look at the play, and it ended up being an incompletion, but it was after the pick 6. And it was part of the reason that people gave Darnold the mental toughness label coming out of college. And it's true, but he still at times seems rattled. But after the pick 6, it was the following drive. It was actually a touchdown drive. I think it was 2nd down or whatever, but they ran a rollout and he threw it to Ryan Griffin in triple coverage. And it was an absolute dime. I mean, but it fell incomplete, but it was just a crazy, why would you even attempt that throw? That probably should have been another interception. And he has a lot of those throws where he completely just trusts his arm. And Jameis has the same thing where they have this blinding faith in their arm, and it's going to lead to some amazing throws. Like the throw to Robbie in Oakland or the one to Berrios or whatever, but then it's going to lead to the interception in Buffalo week 1, or that which could have been intercepted. I mean, he just has this crazy confidence. Now, look, if you go watch that, it's a beautiful throw, and it hits Griffin virtually in the numbers. I think Leonard gets a hand in there and knocks it away. But he just has that kind of Jameis quality where it's like Winston did throw 30 touchdowns last year, but he also threw 30 interceptions. And I don't think Darnold's interception peak is going to be that high. That's why I think he is better than Jameis and will, if he goes to the right system, be actually a solid quarterback in this league. I think he will be. I think he is a 30 touchdown quarterback in this league. But major Jameis Winston vibes on Sunday.
Yeah,
bad habits.
You'll make those throws sometimes because he's that gifted. Jameis Winston is that physically gifted, but overall, over the course of the season, you don't want to do that too much because for every 15, 20-yard completion you get, you're also going to throw in a pick or two, like the one we saw in the Buffalo game, and a couple, although these weren't really quite the gunslinger type. The first one sort of was, but really just they're throws you don't want to try because sometimes you'll complete it and it will look really good because you're so talented you can make them, but you're also sometimes just not going to complete them because they're very hard throws to try. So the quarterbacks like that, for them to become great, like an Aaron Rodgers throws the ball away a lot. He's usually near the top of the league in throwing the ball away, and that's really the key. You have to know when to take your shots, when to let that arm talent shine in a way to where either your guy's getting the ball or it's going to be incomplete. And it's not just turnovers. It's about consistency, reading the field, picking up first downs, finding easy completions for yourself, not always looking for the toughest one. So Darnold can make any throw that applies to him as much as it does to anybody, but it's just the decision-making and the types of throws that he's trying. That is one of the biggest things for him to improve over the course of the season, checking the ball down quicker, which is something he said in the post game after this one, but he's also said that after a lot of games through 3 years now. So it's still something that he needs to improve.
Yeah, he still seems lost. He still seems to be making rookie mistakes. And as I said last week, if this was a game, I mean, this would be a bad game as rookie year as well. But if these are the games that he's having as a rookie, they're a lot more promising because you see the flashes, you see the good plays, and you're like, okay, well, as a rookie, you want to see those peaks because you're confident that through your coaching and you're building around it that you can, and the more experience that he gets, that you can iron out the negatives. But with Darnold, the negatives have seemingly gotten more frequent, and he's still having these games where he feels like a rookie. He's 23 years old, and he's playing like a 23-year-old rookie, which I guess isn't bad. I mean, Ryan Tannehill entered the league at 24, and he's finally hit success at 31. So like you said, he has a lot of time to turn it around. He's still young enough. He's still young enough to be a draft pick in this year's draft. But yeah, I mean, it's little, staring down receivers, doesn't look comfortable in the pocket, reading the field, predetermining where he's going to go with the ball. Just stuff like that is concerning.
Right. And yeah, it's not the production. He's not really, although you would like to see better production, it's going to be hard to do that when Kalen Ballage is your second leading receiver in a game. But there are things that you can look at regardless of what his, final numbers are. And it's stuff like, just only making one read before, deciding to check the ball down. Just a lot of things like that doesn't really, he's not going to put up numbers because he just doesn't have that type of talent or the coach to do so. But there are still things that, regardless, you can look at and see if he's improving. And a lot of them he hasn't really improved yet. So that's really the biggest thing over these next 3 months is, can he improve those things? Like, it would be great if he put up the production to back up his improvement. But as long as you're looking at him being like, okay, he's moving through his reads quicker, he looks more comfortable under pressure, he's getting to the check down quicker when the deep concepts aren't really playing out well, and that's not going to be there. Hit the check down, dump that ball off, give him the best chance to make a play. He's not throwing these hot air balloons that he shouldn't be throwing. He's willing to throw the ball away. His feet, just overall, I talked about pressure, but just overall smoother, more confident, calmer. Things like that are what you really have to look at regardless of the numbers. And it's going to be tough to improve all that stuff in season, but who knows, maybe put a different voice there, a play caller who gives them a different diet of throws, more rollouts, more
Arthur Smith.
Oh, yeah. Yep, that's the guy. That is the guy right there.
Everyone
should read Ben's article if they haven't read it yet. It's already taking over the state of Tennessee. Everyone in Tennessee is just like, oh, I got to root for the Jets now. We don't want them to take Arthur Smith from our team. King Arthur, he's the guy. So check
Bend
that
the knee.
article out.
Bend the knee.
Yeah, absolutely. Bend the knee for King Arthur.
We're starting either it's hashtag bend the knee, hashtag King Arthur to MYJ.
I don't know. We kind of got to work on that hashtag game, but we're going to be tweeting about it a lot over the next few months. So it will develop to something that catches on. I'm looking at this hashtag and like no one else is posting it. So we got to work
I saw one person gave me another King Arthur to MYJ. I'm going to keep tweeting like this the entire season. Michael, we are going to will Arthur Smith to the Jets. But yeah, as Michael said, we worked. I guess I worked pretty hard on this article, and I think that Arthur Smith and Michael did help me with some edits. You could see some Michael's numbers that he threw in there. So it was a CYJ team effort on that article. But I think I laid out pretty well why I think he'd be a perfect match for Joe Douglas in this Jets team. But yeah, lastly, just last few things before we get out of here. Just continuing on the Darnold stuff, and then we'll get out. Just because this popped up in my head, and then we got away from it. But I think that there's two routes with Darnold. And this was the route that I said before the season, which was I think he deserves a year after Gase, which I still hold to be true. But again, if they have that number one pick, I would pick Trevor Lawrence, especially with the whole contract situation and head coach and blah, blah, blah. We've gone over that. But the alternative situation is that you trade him. And if Josh Rosen could get a second and a 5. And Rosen didn't really play. I mean, he played pretty poorly for the Cardinals. I think he played like 10 games or something off the top of my head, and he didn't really play well. What could Darnold get? Because like you said, if they have the number one pick, he probably didn't play too good. But if he has games like he had this game, hopefully more so the San Francisco game, where he has flashes, but it's clear that he's just being held back by just instability all around him. What do you think Sam Darnold could fetch in a trade? Because there are a lot of teams that I think would want Sam Darnold on their team. When you look at Pittsburgh, when you look at New Orleans, San Francisco, Chicago, there's a lot, Minnesota. There's a lot of teams, if you look, that would say, hell yeah, we'll take the guy who's only 23, will be 24 next season, who should have been the number one pick in the draft and is playing for the worst coach in the NFL with the worst team and the worst weapons and I don't want to say a bad offensive line, but right now an injured and bad offensive line. Yeah, we'll take Sam Darnold. There's a lot of teams that would do that. So I would say the expected price for me would be a second-round pick. I think that's fair compensation for him. But Michael, do you think that the Jets could entice some teams to get in a bidding war for him, especially teams that have those older quarterbacks? The Colts are another team that just witnessed him today. That have those older quarterbacks and would say, hell yeah, we'll take this prospect. We think we can fix Adam Gase's mess. Do you think that the Jets could kind of drive that price up to a first-round pick?
Well, it is interesting to compare him to Rosen because, like you said, Rosen, a 2 and a 5 when he's traded by Arizona to Miami. But I think the difference is that since Rosen was still a rookie, I think there was more untapped potential there. Even though Rosen as a rookie was – and right, the contract you still had left as well. But even Rosen was really bad as a rookie. Darnold has never looked as bad as Rosen did. So that does favor Darnold, but it was also his first season. Now you have 3 years of Darnold, so the contract, you don't have much of that left. Eventually he's going to have to get paid if you do want to keep him, or you have to let him hit the open market. And just in terms of the potential, a rookie quarterback you expect to be bad. You expect there to be a lot of untapped potential left, but now Darnold is going to hit the trade. If they do look to trade him after the season, it would be with 3 seasons of tape on there. And, it obviously wouldn't be too impressive tape if the Jets are looking to trade him. So I think that's probably right around where he would be, probably that second round pick range. I don't think he would get a massive package. I mean, it's possible. It depends on how many teams are interested, how the quarterback, the class plays out in the draft, because still a lot can change between now and once the draft arrives. We know plenty of things can happen, both with the combine, off the field stuff, however many games are left between the guys that are playing the season. Does someone else rise on the board, fall? There are a lot of things that can change the quarterback market. So that could change the demand for, a professional prospect like Darnold for a team like the Colts or the Steelers looking for potential future franchise quarterback. So I think he can get something good. Will he get a first rounder, maybe something more? I'm not sure. It would probably take a few teams being interested, but a second round pick is probably what I would think right now. But if he did play well, he could drive the price up. But if he plays well, they're probably not going to want to trade him, and you would probably want to build around that guy. So if they get to that point where they're looking to trade him because they have the number 1 pick, probably second rounder is what I would expect.
Week 3, ladies and gentlemen. Week 3.
Week 3.
This is the week that if you had asked me 4 weeks ago if this is the conversation we'd be having after week 3, I guess I would have been pretty depressed and honestly surprised. This is the second year in a row that the Jets have broken my spirit after one game. Both games against Buffalo.
I mean, at least last season after the Cowboys game, we had new life. But it looks like this season could be after that 4th game also.
Yeah, it looks like
comes back.
The new life after Gase is gone. But yeah, on the Darnold stuff, I still think he's going to be back next year. As I said, I don't think they're going to wind up with that number 1 pick. You pretty much have to have not insane, but good luck getting it because there are a lot of bad teams in the league. And I think the most likely thing is that you give him a year with a new head coach. And if it doesn't work out, you use the 2 first-round picks that you have in 2022, I guess that is, to trade up and get a QB then. But I mean, look.
Yeah, I do think the most likely thing is he'll be back. What most likely plays out is he doesn't have an insane breakout, but he's not extremely bad. Just more of the same, I think, flashes and low points, which is scary. This is what I was talking about earlier that you want to avoid. It's not a great situation to be in to have 3 years of your franchise quarterback being in that kind of that area where he can start, but he's also a lower-end starter. So it's a scary place to be in, but he is only 23 years old. He's much younger than a lot of franchise quarterbacks were when they started their first games, like Ryan Tannehill, who was 24 as a rookie. So he does have that time. So you got to hope that with a new head coach, again, that hopefully whoever they bring in is the right guy to clean up some of his mechanical, fundamental things. But I think most likely Darnold will be quarterback next season. They'll probably win 3 or 4 games, pick somewhere in the 3 to 6 range, and he'll be back as quarterback again. And that's it's a little bit of a worrisome thing if he doesn't have that breakout finish the season. But at only 23 years old, 24 next season, you can hope that hopefully you get the right guy. Hopefully his last name is Smith and his first name is Arthur.
He's the guy to fix Darnold.
He's the guy to get the most out of him, to save him from Gase.
Yeah, Darnold or not.
Arthur Smith is the perfect guy for that.
Darnold or not, Arthur Smith is the first perfect guy for this job. But especially when you look at what he did for Ryan Tannehill, he can clearly fix Darnold, and I think he'd be a great fit in that offense. But I can't get too excited about it because I know that because he's such an obviously great fit, and I'm very certain that he's going to be a good coach, that the Jets are going to wind up hiring Urban Meyer or Jim Harbaugh or something. But yeah, to your point, I mean, Baker Mayfield's going to be 26 next season, and Darnold, he's still younger than him, so he has a lot of time. But as we just said, week 3, and these are the discussions that we're having. Week 3,
we're not talking about. So how can the Jets contain the Broncos' edge rush? So how are they going to get
we don't even care. We're cheering for the Jets to get
Driscoll
blown out.
Talking about who's the quarterback going to be in 2022?
Right, exactly. And we're wearing black unis for a funeral instead of swag. You can follow us at CYJ Pod on Twitter. You can follow Michael at Michael_Nania. Myself at Ben W. Blessing. And you can find us at iTunes, Spotify, Jets X Factor. Go check it out. Best place to go for Jets content. Check out the Arthur Smith article. Let us know what your thoughts are on Gase being fired, this game against Thursday, what you're rooting for, who you think the best head coach would be for the Jets. Arthur Smith's the only correct answer. And your thoughts on the whole Sam Darnold QB situation and the decision that Joe Douglas could be facing this offseason. But that'll do it for us. Yet another depressing episode of the Cool Your Jets podcast. But hopefully the next time we are airing a podcast, it will be the Adam Gase fired celebratory podcast on Friday. But I have a feeling that the Jets are going to win this game and he's going to survive. But we will see. And that'll do it for us.
Hashtag King Arthur to
NYJ. I was thinking the hashtag too while you're in my mind. I guess it's hashtag King Arthur to NYJ. Hashtag bend the knee as well.
For now, that's it. But if you have a better idea, just go ahead. And
that's true. If you have a better hashtag for me, make sure to tweet us with that. But that'll do it for us. Everybody stay safe, stay healthy. And as I said last week, don't let the Jets ruin your life.
Darnold takes the snap, looks left under pressure. Bullets one over the middle. And he's got Crowder at the 10. Cuts it back at the 5. Goal line. Sam Darnold did it again. Jones,
McDougal. And he is in for a Jets touchdown.
That's over the middle in the air, picked off. Brian Poole to the end zone, touchdown.
There goes Darnold. And Bell! He's doing it all for the Jets.